Today, we are focusing on a figure whose story is one of the most, powerful inversions of expectation in history, Rahab. When we hear her name, we usually hear it attached to a single kind of compromising reputation, but her story is just a staggering study in radical faith and unexpected life-altering grace.
That is precisely the mission of this deep dive. We have a powerful stack of sources today, narrative excerpts that track Rahab's story from the literal walls of the condemned city of Jericho all the way into, the lineage of David and ultimately the Messiah.
Wow.
We're here to unpack how this woman, known pretty much only by her profession, became not just a survivor, but an absolutely essential, permanent fixture in a nation's salvation narrative.
And what the sources immediately highlight is the paradox, right? This is the core question we are tackling. Why would divine choice settle on her, a harlot, to carry the sign of salvation?
Yeah, the typical hero narrative demands a priest or maybe a high-ranking soldier or a recognized leader, someone respectable.
Exactly. Choosing Rahab, who stands outside the societal and religious boundaries of the coming nation, it just flips the entire script.
It really does.
It tells us something fundamental about the nature of the grace being extended here.
It forces us to redefine what worthiness even means in the context of divine history. But to really feel the weight of her choice, we have to place ourselves squarely in her world. We have to set the scene.
Okay.
Think about the dimly lit skyline of Jericho. This isn't just any walled city. It's a heavily fortified symbol of resistance, and the tension is, it's excruciating. Fear, our sources emphasize, is thick and palpable.
Imagine the night sounds. Maybe the distant low murmur of that massive Israelite encampment just across the river. The city is awake, alert, and probably terrifyingly silent in some ways.
Yeah, the silence before the storm.
And there, standing precariously on the city wall, not inside the inner sanctum, but right on the boundary between safety and utter destruction, is Rahab's house.
She is positioned at the absolute physical edge of two colliding worlds, and her single decision that night is what transforms her from, a footnote of scandal into a figure of monumental, enduring faith.
Okay, let's start by drilling down into Rahab's identity and location because they seem intrinsically linked. Our sources consistently refer to her as Rahab the harlot. We probably need to spend some time analyzing what that designation actually meant in a city like Jericho back then.
Right. It means she was primarily defined by her reputation, which afforded her a certain social standing, or perhaps more accurately, a lack thereof. But we need to be careful not to see this only as, a moral indictment.
Okay, how so?
Well, in a complex military and commercial hub like Jericho, a woman in her position often operated outside the typical familial and societal constraints. She likely had a degree of independence, access to information, maybe even a certain freedom that women bound by traditional family structures might not have possessed.
That's a crucial distinction. It speaks to a level of intelligence, maybe, and social dexterity. She was probably by necessity acutely aware of the comings and goings, the political whispers, the general mood of the city.
Exactly, which would have made her establishment a pretty good place for gathering information, or conversely for those trying to go unnoticed, like, say, spies.
And this feeds directly into her physical location you mentioned. Her house stood literally on the wall. Let's just pause on the double meaning there.
Yeah. Sociologically, she was already living on the boundary, outside mainstream respectability. Physically, her vulnerability was maximized. She was the first line of defense, the most exposed structure to any potential assault.
We tend to visualize these ancient walls as symbols of pure strength. But her house was a piece of that strength that was maybe the most easily targeted. She lived right where destruction would logically begin.
It's powerful imagery.
Yeah.
Physically exposed, living right on the edge between the condemned world of Jericho and the approaching power of the Israelites.
This physical location must have been strategic for business. Maybe easy access for travelers or soldiers coming in and out.
Quite possibly. But it also symbolized her constant precariousness, didn't it? She was caught between loyalty to her home city and the devastating truth of the events happening just outside those walls. She was the person with the most immediate, clear view of the danger.
And what was the state of that danger? The sources paint a really vivid picture of the atmosphere inside Jericho. It wasn't just apprehension, it was described as sheer terror.
The source says the hearts of the people trembled in fear and had basically melted. This paralysis, this citywide fear, is critical context for understanding Rahab's unique action.
Absolutely. We have to remember that this fear wasn't based on, guesswork or rumor. It was based on established fact, on intelligence reports.
Exactly. Jericho knew precisely why the Israelites were camped across the Jordan. They knew about the Red Sea miracle, even though that was decades earlier. More recently, and maybe more terrifyingly, they knew about the utter destruction of Sihon and Og, these two powerful Amorite kings, just on the other side of the river.
So the military intelligence had definitely reached them. They weren't just scared of some random nomadic army. They were terrified of the power behind that army.
They knew that the invaders were coming not just with, iron and shields, but with the backing of some kind of supernatural force that could apparently manipulate nature and destroy armies instantly. That's terrifying.
Yeah. That pervasive fear created an environment of heightened military readiness, which then raises the stakes for the next development, the visitors. Late that night, two strangers knocked on her door.
And the sources make it instantly clear they were not ordinary clientele. They were spies sent by Joshua himself to, quote, view the country, even Jericho.
And the moment she lets them in, everything changes for her. This is no longer just a simple knight's transaction. It is high treason.
Absolutely. Hiding enemy combatants within the most fortified structure of a city, bracing for siege. That's an act that demands immediate execution if discovered. No questions asked.
It requires an immediate, radical commitment from her. This encounter defines her decision point, really. She chooses to place her life not on the stability of the mighty walls of Jericho, but on the perceived power and, I guess, the inevitability of this god she had only heard about.
It's an act of incredible, high-risk hospitality and, frankly, allegiance switching right there on the spot.
The tension must have been just unbearable. The sources describe the immediate military reaction. Somebody must have spotted the spies entering her place because word was sent straight to the king of Jericho. Men have come here tonight from the people of Israel to search out the country.
Right, the alarm bells go off immediately. The city's authorities were instantly mobilized.
And we get that incredible mental picture. The spies are quickly secreted away on her rooftop, probably hidden under stalks of flax that Rahab apparently had spread out there to dry. Common practice, but convenient timing.
Very convenient. Meanwhile, the noise level outside probably explodes. The city guards are coming, and they're coming directly for her house, the only known point of entry for these suspicious visitors.
And the confrontation happens right there, at the threshold of her door. Rahab faces the city's authority, their soldiers, who demand the truth. Where are the men who came to you tonight?
And she executes this pivotal, defining move of deception. She tells the king's men that, yes, the visitors were here, but they left just before the city gates closed at nightfall. And then she sends the guards on this wild goose chase down towards the Jordan River fords.
The efficiency of the lie is pretty remarkable. She doesn't deny they were there, which might have seemed suspicious. She confirms it, provides a seemingly logical explanation for their disappearance, and gives them a false direction to pursue. Smart.
Very smart.
Yeah.
But this is the moment where our source material demands we dig into the ethical complexity of it all.
Yeah, okay, wait. So the source material defines this radical decision as faith, right? But does it ever truly grapple with the fact that her immediate action was an act of treason and, well, a flat-out lie against her own people? Isn't that an ethical complication we need to address, especially for, our deep dive audience?
It absolutely is. And the sources don't really shy away from the contradiction, interestingly. They assert that she lied, yes, but they explicitly interpret the motivation behind the lie. The source states she acted not for profit, but for faith. That distinction is the core theological nugget here.
So the lie becomes a function of a superior allegiance. It wasn't deception for, simple self-preservation or maybe financial gain. It was framed as an act of worship, a submission to a power she believed was inherently superior to the human, probably flawed authority of the king of Jericho.
Precisely. Her lie was a manifestation of this deep inner conviction that transcended political or tribal loyalty. And that conviction was born out of something she had simply heard. She wasn't an eyewitness to the Red Sea parting, obviously.
Oh, wait, that was years ago.
Years ago. But the stories were so pervasive, so consistent, maybe so detailed, that they became established fact in her mind, enough to risk everything.
Okay, let's detail what she knew. Because it wasn't just vague rumors. She had, specific historical intelligence. She actually lists the specific accounts that convinced her. The miracle of the Red Sea, a god who could split oceans, the total defeat of Pharaoh's army.
And more recently, the destruction of those two powerful Amorite kings we mentioned, Sihon and Og, just across the Jordan. These were major regional powers completely wiped out.
These events weren't ancient history to her. They were current events proving the seemingly irresistible power of the Israelite God. She saw the evidence, understood the implications, and her rational conclusion, it seems, was that resistance was futile.
And faith was the only viable path to survival.
This is the great contrast that elevates her story, isn't it? The entire fortified city of Jericho was paralyzed by fear stemming from these exact same stories. But Rahab, the social outcast living on the edge, used the very same stories not to tremble, but to propel decisive action.
Fear paralyzes. Radical belief fuels commitment. That's the takeaway there.
And that radical belief culminates in this astonishing moment of theological declaration where Rahab moves from just, intelligence gathering to theological certainty. She is not a priest or a military leader, yet she speaks a truth that the king of Jericho and all his officials either ignored or actively refused to acknowledge.
Which is why the sources essentially call her a prophet in that moment.
Right.
She wasn't delivering a future prediction of the way we normally think of prophets, but she was proclaiming a radical truth about the present nature of the divine, a truth that contradicted everything her culture believed.
And we have the direct quote that seals her status. She tells the spies, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, because the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath." Let's pause on that statement because, wow, that is monumental coming from her.
It really is. Why is that specific phrasing so important coming from a woman in Jericho?
Well, Jericho was a pagan polytheistic culture, right? Their deities were local, territorial gods, gods of the river, gods of the sun, gods of the city walls, maybe.
Exactly. Rahab, in that moment, proclaims allegiance to a God who is universal. He is not just stronger than the gods of Jericho. He is the singular sovereign power who controls both the celestial realm, heaven above, and the material world, on earth beneath. All of it.
So she didn't just choose a better God among many. She recognized the one true God, acknowledging his cosmic authority over everything.
That proclamation, the recognition of transcendence, is what, according to the analysis, earns her the title of prophet, regardless of her social status or her lack of formal religious training.
The analysis is clear then. By recognizing this absolute divine authority and proclaiming it in the face of imminent destruction, she essentially declared her ultimate allegiance shifted. That night, the social outcast became the theological visionary.
And that faith was the catalyst, the absolute key for her family's salvation.
Okay, so having secured their safety and made this incredible declaration of faith, Rahab then negotiates a covenant, basically, for her own protection and her family's.
That's right. She makes them swear an oath.
As the spies prepare to descend the wall and escape down a rope she provides, they give her the instruction that leads to the enduring, visible symbol of the entire story: the scarlet cord.
This is where faith becomes visible and tangible. It's not just internal belief anymore. The spies issue a clear, vital, specific instruction. Hang this line of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down, and gather your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household into your house. Everyone must be inside.
The mechanics of this covenant are fascinating. It required two things from Rahab. First, a physical action, hanging the cord, and second, physical proximity. Everyone she intended to save must be inside that specific house.
And it's defined immediately as the specific sign of mercy and the only mark of protection available. If anyone steps outside, the deal is off.
And we have to focus on the color. It had to be scarlet. This choice is often interpreted by our sources not as, accidental, but highly intentional.
Yes, connecting it to a much larger theological pattern of salvation that's tied to this visible, singular hue.
Let's delve into that symbolism then. What does scarlet historically represent in this context, and how does it connect to other key narrative events, like, say, Passover?
Well, the color scarlet, often derived from a dye associated with lifeblood and covering, it instantly triggers a connection for many interpreters to the fundamental covenantal mark of redemption, the Passover in Egypt.
Ah, okay, the blood on the doorposts.
Exactly. Just as the Israelites were commanded to place the blood of a lamb on their doorpost so the angel of death would pass over their homes, Rahab was commanded to place a scarlet thread symbolic of blood and life in her window as a sign of exemption from the coming judgment on Jericho.
That connection is profound. In both cases, salvation wasn't achieved through personal merit or military strength or even inherent righteousness. It was achieved through a visible outward sign of an applied covering.
A mark of substitutionary protection demanded by faith. It establishes the foundational theme that runs right through these narratives. faith must have an actionable, visible sign.
Right. For Rahab, that action was hanging the cord. It wasn't enough to just believe in her heart. She had to display the conviction publicly, or at least visibly, to the invading army.
And the sources draw this powerful line of connection, describing the scarlet cord as, essentially, a preview of the ultimate blood that would one day flow on a cross.
So this single thread hanging from a small window on the wall of a condemned city represents a consistent thread, if you will, of divine mercy running through history, marked by sacrifice and blood.
Exactly. The color signals that principle. The act of faith, hanging the cord, led directly to preservation, and the symbol itself points forward to the ultimate definitive act of redemption. This is what elevates Rahab's story beyond just a simple historical anecdote. It makes her house a kind of microsite of global theological significance.
The ultimate context, of course, is the stark consequence for the rest of Jericho. We know the history. The army marched, the trumpets sounded 7 times, the people shouted, and those supposedly impenetrable walls just fell.
Crumbled. The city was utterly destroyed, burned to the ground as a sign of judgment, total annihilation.
Contrast that universal ruin with Rahab's specific fate. Our sources make a massive point of emphasizing that her house, the house with the conspicuous scarlet cord displayed in the window, was the only part of that entire surrounding wall that stood untouched amid the rubble.
Can you imagine seeing that? Her home, built on the very precipice of destruction, became an island of salvation in a sea of judgment.
While everyone else died in judgment because of the city's shared fear and ultimately defiance, she and her entire family lived in grace because of her singular belief in that displayed sign.
The outcome really solidifies the lesson. The grace was specifically tied to that visible marker. It wasn't arbitrary. The invading army knew precisely where to extend the protection. She saw absolute ruin surrounding her, but she received the promised redemption because she believed and acted on the covenant sign.
She moved from the condemned pagan society into the promised security of the covenant people, literally stepping over the rubble.
The story could end there, couldn't it? A thrilling tale of survival against impossible odds. A great story in itself.
Absolutely. But the true deep dive, the ultimate aha moment, comes centuries later when we discover her permanent legacy. She didn't just survive, she was fully integrated into the Israelite community.
Fully integrated, which leads to this improbable ancestry that makes her story absolutely foundational.
Her integration was complete. She actually married into the community. Our sources direct us specifically to the New Testament record, the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 1, to understand her permanent placement in the divine narrative.
And it's right there. The source material provides the specific, honestly staggering inclusion in Matthew 1, verse 5, which reads, Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab.
Just stated as fact, Rahab.
Just like that. This inclusion is monumental. Rahab, the former citizen of a condemned pagan city, the woman defined by her profession, marries Salmon, who tradition holds was likely one of the spies she saved, or at least a prominent Israelite leader.
Okay.
And she becomes the mother of Boaz. And Boaz, of course, is himself a figure of incredible integrity in the book of Ruth, who marries Ruth, another Gentile woman.
Another outsider,
a Moabitess. And they become the great-grandparents of King David.
Wow. So Rahab is permanently placed in the royal lineage. Through David's line, through his royal bloodline, eventually came Jesus, the Messiah.
Exactly. This reframes her story entirely, transforming it from just a historical anecdote of quick thinking and survival into a core, intentional component of the messianic ancestry.
We really must pause to acknowledge the source material's analysis of this inclusion. Because the genealogy listed in Matthew is highly curated, it's not just a random list. And the inclusion of 4 women, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, is widely seen as very intentional.
It is. And each of these women carried some form of, let's say, compromised or non-traditional background. Rahab was a Gentile and a harlot. Ruth was a Gentile Moabitess from an enemy nation. Tamar was involved in a pretty shocking act of deception to secure her lineage. Bathsheba was involved in adultery with King David himself.
That analysis highlights the consistency of the theme, doesn't it? Grace is actively extended to the outsider, the non-traditional, the religiously other, and the morally compromised. The lineage itself becomes a testament to redemption, not human perfection.
It communicates powerfully that divine choice is not restricted by human definitions of purity or social standing or ethnic background. Rahab's inclusion, in particular, showcases the ultimate power of redemption. Her scandalous past is entirely overshadowed by the magnitude of her faith.
And the breadth of grace?
and the breadth of grace that not only saved her household, but incorporated her permanently into the sacred history of salvation.
That's the definitive conclusion our sources lead us toward. A woman defined by her social disgrace became part of the bloodline of the Messiah, and the analysis sums it up so clearly. That's not scandal, that's grace.
It speaks volumes about the nature of God's redemptive work, It wasn't about seeking out the most ethically pristine individual according to human standards. It was about honoring the radical, decisive faith of someone whose circumstances demanded a profound leap of conviction against all odds.
And this is where Rahab's story connects so powerfully to you, the listener, today. If your past feels messy, if your reputation feels ruined, if you feel like you stand on the wall sometimes, precariously exposed between two worlds, Rahab's experience offers profound hope.
The core takeaway is crystal clear from these sources. God doesn't primarily look at where you've been or what title society might have placed on you. He looks at what you believe and how that belief compels you to act. Her entire identity, her survival, and her incredible legacy hinged on that one moment of radical faith demonstrated by the scarlet cord.
That faith saved her then, when the walls were literally crumbling around her, and the theological principle remains the same now, because, as the sources suggest, the same scarlet thread that marked her window for immediate physical protection still runs symbolically through the cross, marking all who put their faith in that covering for eternal redemption. #outro.
What an incredible journey we've taken. From a house on the literal edge of destruction, a house everyone in Jericho knew for, well, probably the wrong reasons,
Right.
to a name permanently etched in the lineage of grace. Rahab's deep dive is just the ultimate reminder that belief, when acted upon, will always triumph over social reputation and external circumstance in this narrative.
And before we close, let's just revisit that complex point we touched on earlier in Section 2, because it's a necessary synthesis, I think, for understanding the depth of this narrative fully. Rahab's salvation was founded on two things: a profound, informed belief in a superior divine authority,
Yeah.
and an act of clear defiance, the lie against the established governing authorities of her own city.
This creates that complex ethical tension right at the heart of the story.
Yeah.
Her faithful act required her to actively subvert the local military and state authorities who were demanding information from her. For her, choosing faith meant choosing immediate political disobedience. It was treason.
The narrative doesn't condemn the lie. Rather, it seems to elevate the superior allegiance of faith above immediate adherence to local, flawed human law. The story suggests that God can and often does use individuals whose actions, viewed strictly through a human-centric ethical lens, seem complex or even contradictory
Absolutely.
to achieve a massive, greater redemptive purpose.
So the question for you, the listener, to ponder is this: when the authorities of your current life, maybe societal expectation, cultural norms, or even human law stand in direct opposition to the allegiance demanded by your faith, what does Rahab's story tell us about the priority of radical, decisive action? And how often do divine movements begin, not with the cooperation of the respectable insiders, but with the defiance of the marginalized outsiders?
Something profound to consider as you reflect on the ultimate power of that scarlet cord. We appreciate you diving deep with us.
Catch you next time.